on the computer. I almost beat her. Hey, everybody, this is Kenny and
Kenny Squared.
the Sports on the Positive Tip podcast. And Kenny, how you doing out there in the Great Midwest?
It's good. It's been an interesting week for Cleveland sports. They had a doubleheader yesterday. Rookie of the month now, I could say Stephen Kwan hit. They had a huge comeback in the eighth inning against the Padres, which good team.
Yeah.
He had a walk-off single, I think, in the 10th or something like that. So.
Wow. Okay. Do you see them getting into the mix at all this year? Or I know that division has started off really slow, the AL Central, but do you see them with any shot in the mix? They seem like they're rebuilding though with some really good young players.
Yeah, I think they can hang around there. As we know, Terry Francona is a good manager. I think because of that, they have a shot. Also, their starting pitching always seems to be really good.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Right now, yeah, that entire division is pretty much bad, except for Minnesota. But who knows? They'll beat up on each other anyway, and then everyone will get beat up by the AL East. So
yeah. White Sox have some injuries and they lost one of their starting pitchers, right, to free agency. But I think they'll be in the mix as we go on. I was surprised that the Royals didn't get off to a better start. But the Guardians, I like that they've rebuilt. It's just always been odd to me that they don't spend any money. They finally did with Ramirez a little bit. But I want to come back to baseball because I have a topic that is New York back. And we could talk about the Mets, Yankees, Jets, and Giants, Knicks, Nets, and the Rangers, I think, lost in 3 overtimes. The Islanders getting ready to get started here in the playoffs. But you and I spent a lot of time last year and even part of the time this year talking about Trevor Bauer. So I don't want to skate that issue as that whole thing came down, I think, a little bit after we had did our last podcast. So we didn't really get a chance to talk about them suspending him for 2 years. And I really want to get your take on it. Bauer, obviously deep Ohio roots, as obviously, with the Indians, and then winning the Cy Young with the Reds, signed the big contract with the Dodgers, and found himself in a lot of hot water. Just a terrible case. And you and I are on the same page with any inkling of violence towards women, whether it's consensual or not. To me, I don't know that matters in my personal opinion, but for the law, it certainly does. And I just, you don't know who to believe. No charges are brought now against him yet. MLB decided to suspend him for 2 years. So a lot of mixed emotions, I know, for me, and I know for you as well. And I know you had even some personal contact with Trevor Bauer as he had, helped the meeting place along with the charity and everything, and chose you guys, even though, you didn't have enough votes, but he felt like you had some good momentum. And so I don't know what to make of the whole thing. So what's your thoughts? And I know he's suing MLB, but I think that's going to be a long fight. So what were your thoughts on this whole just terrible, unfortunate thing that's happened now with Trevor Bauer?
I'll start it out with wow. MLB is really making a statement here because we're talking. This is a guy that has never had any criminal charges against him. Hasn't had. He's been exonerated of all or acquitted of all charges, and yet baseball is handing down the longest suspension they've ever handed down to anyone. Some of the other domestic violence stuff, I think of Aroldis Chapman, he wasn't arrested, but it was clear that he was in a very bad state there. Jose Reyes was actually charged, Ozuna too, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because it seems like I obviously I wasn't there. I don't know for sure, but based on kind of what I see, it looks like what he did was like legally okay, but morally not okay. Um, because like just because you ask for consent doesn't mean what you're doing is wrong, like
Mhm.
isn't wrong. And I
Mhm.
think essentially that's kind of what's happened with him. And while yes, he's not going to face any legal charges, the MLBs can still do whatever they want.
Mhm.
If they feel like you violated the domestic violence policy, which doesn't say you have to be charged to be suspended, then they can do that. And I remember like when this whole thing started, they were like, yeah, I feel like they're gonna like a lot of the inside people were saying, I think they're gonna come down hard on him. 2 years is a long time. He's already missed a year because of the kind of waiting in place to see how everything plays out. And from what I've read, they aren't counting that as time served. So he's not going to be eligible till 2024. And this
Wow.
is a guy that is in the middle of his prime. And also through all of this, kind of one of the things that's been lost in the applesauce a little bit, Trevor Bauer has been very open about how you can increase your spin rate and everything like that, how you can become a better pitcher by using sticky stuff. We've never seen him pass the crackdown on the sticky stuff. And it seems like he's been open on Twitter about it in the past, like you can do a lot more. You could be a lot more successful if you use it, and MLB doesn't care. So I wouldn't be surprised if he used it in 2020 to win the Cy Young.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we haven't seen him after that. And now you're taking 3 years away from him of actually playing baseball. That's assuming that like this whole appeal process will be a quick one and everything like that, which typically it isn't.
Right.
So I wonder like how this is going to affect him long term, because he is pretty charitable. I remember obviously you mentioned us getting it was like $2,500 from the Learning Center. But
Yes.
I remember also when there was that whole weird mix up with they thought the Mets were signing him. You look now and you're like, praise God they didn't sign him. But like that whole mix up, he ended up like donating, I think $2,000 to 5 different New York charities, kind of as like a, hey, I'm sorry for the confusion, even though he didn't have to do that. So like he seems like an odd guy. Like it's hard to kind of get a good read on him because like some people it's like, well, they seem really good. There's no way that this could happen. But also like he seems like the kind of like brash. I'm gonna compare him to like Baker Mayfield and that type of like being very open and like not being shy about clapping back at the media and things like that. Like he's called the
Yeah.
media like gossips. He's filed a defamation suit against multiple newspapers for all the stuff that they put out against him. So it's going to be a very interesting case. I think more than anything, MLB moving forward, it's going to kind of show how they're going to deal with it. Because like if it becomes like really bad on them, then when it comes to other domestic violence cases, they might be a little shyer about going after them.
Yeah.
But look at the NFL, look at the NBA, who've had domestic violence cases. No one's ever been suspended for 2 years. So, like, it shows MLB is trying to take this seriously.
Yeah. And I applaud that. I think you and I are 100% on the same page. I asked you this question through text last week. I wonder if MLB knows something more about this case than the actual authorities do, which would seem kind of hard to believe, but I'm sure they had their own investigators looking at everything and speaking to the lady involved in this. I mean, for them to hand down 2 years, and you rattled off a few of the other cases that in those cases, if my understanding and recollection is correct, now Ozuna is playing now. I mean, he got suspended a good chunk of last year, but he's playing now. But in the case of Chapman as well as Reyes, if I recall, the wives were uncooperative. They didn't want to cooperate with the authorities, causing them to drop charges. And I think Reyes may have gotten something fined, even though, because I think there were witnesses with Reyes. And if I remember this right, here you have a lady who is totally willing to cooperate with the authorities. Sometimes, things happen behind the scenes, there's money paid off. It doesn't seem to be the case with her. She seemed devastated that no charges were brought against him. And so it's just really puzzling that this penalty would be this long without them knowing something else that we don't know, unless it's just they've taken a line in the sand here, which is fine. You'd wish they'd come out and say it, but probably legally they can't. But if they're taking a line in the sand, like you did, and I'm totally with you, that just because what you might have done was legal doesn't mean that it was right. In fact, it was awful. And maybe they're taking that line in the sand, and we don't want you representing, because it is a privilege, right, to put on a major league uniform and to make the money that he was going to make. And we haven't talked about the money that he's losing. And I don't mean to chuckle about that, because this is nothing is lighthearted about this whole story, but that is a lot of money that he's losing now. I would think he still has money because he had made some money before, but this was his first big, huge contract that the Dodgers signed him to. The last time you and I were talking, because I wonder what the way forward is here, and that's what we were talking about before. And we felt like a team like the Dodgers with Clayton Kershaw, Justin Turner, Mookie Betts, Dave Roberts, the manager, that if there's a clubhouse that he could acclimate himself back into with the leaders on that team, the veteran leaders on that team, that would probably be one of the best teams for him to acclimate himself to. We don't know what the Dodgers is going to look like in 2 years. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Also, just he's going to be losing $64 million over his next 2 years. He did get paid last year because he was on technically administrative leave, but yeah, $64 million. And I believe his contract was only 3 years. So he's going to, when he comes back, he's going to be a free agent.
So when he comes back, so the Dodgers are off the hook. They don't even have to worry. So that what I just said, kind of off the table, unless he appeals it and he wins. I would have to imagine this would go to an arbitrator. If he appeals it and wins, I can't imagine that they'll do anything this year. They maybe cut it in half, let him come back next year, in which case then the Dodgers have him. And the Dodgers could just do like the Mets with Cano, and it's obviously much, much different. Cano not involved in anything like that, but just kind of eat the 1 year as opposed to the 2 years and just let him go. But then, can you imagine another team picking him up? This may be like Ray Rice, where we've seen the last of him on a mound. I mean, I don't know where this goes.
Yeah. But you never know. Deshaun Watson. Well, Deshaun Watson was a great player. It's the only reason why he's back in the league.
Yeah.
But also, teams, I would say, if I'm the Yankees, this guy's missed 3 years of baseball. I don't know if I'd want a guy that's missed that much time. You would take guys that, let's say, have had injuries for 2 years, and you're still hesitant about bringing them on. So yeah, I don't know if I would do that.
And Cano is, I'll just use him again. He's older, obviously, but that 1 year, he was showing in 2020 that even though he was getting up in his 30s, that he could still hit. And it was clear the first part of this year, and I do think a team will pick him up. I was hearing the Marlins will probably pick him up. I think he'll get a shot this year. But him losing a year, at that stage in his career was devastating. Bauer, before he went out, I would say top 10 pitcher in the top 10 of major league pitchers, right? At least in the top 10, maybe even higher. But will he be there in 2024? Probably not. It's such an interesting case. It's tragic all the way around. Only him and the lady were in the room, so they know, it's just the two of them that know what actually happened. But on the surface, it just seems awful. So we'll follow it and see. I would like to see they probably won't, but I'd like to see baseball, make some sort of statement one way or another. And I guess at some point they may have to, if this, goes to court and some of those records. I would imagine that for baseball, will probably go to an arbitrator, is my guess. And then I think we'll probably learn a little bit more of the details. So let's jump, if it's okay, to something a little bit that makes you and I a little bit more happier. But we're people can watch us from all over the country, so we're still kind of, even though you live there in Cleveland, we're still very New York centric. So I just put the question out there: is New York finally starting to come back? So let's start with the Mets doing still very, very well. First place in the division. I think they're 18-9 now, which I'll take. But they're playing extremely well. They lost yesterday. They're getting still tremendous starting pitching, very timely hitting, doubleheader sweep the other night. Since we talked, a combined no-hitter, which is unbelievable for the Mets. And so, but I don't want to go too far into the Mets today, because I want to turn the spotlight over to the Yankees, who lost 2-1 last night, but 11 in a row. They just like caught fire and they took care of business. So are the Yankees back?
Yeah. Now I know I've heard this a couple times, but I'm gonna kind of say I understand, but still. Yankees have had an easy April schedule. They played the Orioles, they played the Royals, they've played the Guardians, but they just took 2 out of 3 from the Blue Jays. Earlier in the year, they split against the Blue Jays. They've taken 2 out of 3 from the Red Sox, although the Red Sox have struggled this year. So like a lot of they've played a soft schedule. They still won 11 in a row. Because like when you look at like, let's take it from a Mets perspective. Let's say you're playing the Pirates, the Reds, and the Diamondbacks. Like if you're looking at 3 game series, you're hoping for like, let's go 7-2. You'd take 9-0, obviously, in a heartbeat. But I think what's really been, for me, very encouraging and something that I'm looking forward to moving on is the Yankees starting pitching has been spectacular.
Yeah.
Even in their losses, they're losing these games very close. Now,
Yeah.
they should have saved some runs from the day before last night, but like they losing 2-1 and they had the tying and winning runs on base. Like their starting pitching is keeping them in games. Their bullpen has been amazing. Loizaga has been a little Chad Green has given up a couple big home runs, but Clay Holmes has been spectacular. Michael King has been almost unhittable. Your boy Miguel Castro has been really good too. Chapman has really locked down the ninth.
Yeah.
So like I think when you look at this team, the biggest improvements for me, the starting pitching, there's not really like a weakness, but also their defense has been incredible. I'm gonna check this now to double check, but they going into yesterday, they had the lowest amount of errors of any team in baseball.
Wow.
Which last year they were like in pretty much dead last.
Yeah.
Gleyber Torres was really bad at shortstop.
Yeah.
And also like having Voit versus Rizzo at first base, I think has really helped.
Yeah.
But like they have a positive defensive run save. I want to say around 6 this year. Last year they were -41, just to kind of show the difference.
Wow.
They had 56 unearned runs last year. So far, I believe they have 6. I saw the stats somewhere.
Comparing the same time. Wow.
Here we go. They had 68 earned runs in all of 2021. They've had 5 so far this year, on pace for 36.
Wow.
So
and cutting that in half.
Yeah.
At least. Wow.
So their defense has been a huge improvement, whether you have Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, who's a much better shortstop than Gleyber Torres was. In the outfield, having Gallo out there, Hicks and Judge. Stanton has also been really good out there. So I think their defense has improved. But I think, this like, obviously it's early May. But right now, could we be seeing another rematch of 2000 coming here? Because you had said, is New York back? I think we're looking at it. New York hasn't won a title in any of the 4 major sports since 2012 with the Giants and taking down Tom Brady for the second time.
10 years. Yeah.
And
Wow.
really, like, the only team that's come close has been the Mets. Well, I guess the Rangers also, I think they were in the Stanley Cup Finals too.
Yeah.
But like, no one's really come that close. The
Yeah.
Yankees are in the playoffs a lot, but now it seems like they have, because like in the playoffs, you can have all the bats you want, but those bats get silenced very quickly. Starting pitching is what carries you, especially when you have a deep bullpen
No doubt.
nowadays.
Yeah.
I think the Mets, it's the same thing. They've got an excellent bullpen. Pick Joely Rodriguez in the right spot, he'll be fine.
He did well. Yeah, he's doing well. He started off very rocky. He's had probably about 4 or 5 really good outings in a row, actually.
Yeah. Well, and also you have the great 1-2 combination of DeGrom and Scherzer. Like, you're gonna be up 2-0 in every series. So
Scherzer's been great, and we just hope DeGrom comes back. The news was pretty good. But who knows? I mean, you blink now and he's coming up on almost a year that he's been out, so
yeah.
Who knows? I don't want to take the shine off the Yankees, though. They have played outstanding baseball, and you're right. They made some strategic, defensive moves there with Gallo, certainly with Rizzo. And I've talked about Rizzo before. I just think the world of him as a player. And then, a lot of people question why you getting the shortstop that's kind of light hitting, and look at his defense, so, and he's been good hitting. He started off slow, but he's been hitting well. That Yankee ball, I don't know where the Yankees get those arms from. I mean, those are names that most people, a month ago, 2 months ago, hadn't even heard of. And they have just done a spectacular job. And the very other quiet thing that's been happening, and we wanted to get Dave Ruff, but he had a very good reason for not being on this morning. I can't say why, but he had a very good reason for not being on this morning. But we wanted him to talk a little Celtics, but very quietly, the Red Sox have off to an awful start. And, one of the things you don't want in any sport, and in baseball, there is time to make it up, but you don't want to fall too far behind. And it's very, very early. We're in the first week of May, so it is still very early. But you don't want to fall far behind. Not in this division. Not when you have, Tampa as well, and the Blue Jays and the Yankees just blistering hot. And you're struggling 6-7 games under 500. You don't want to fall far behind. I don't know what's wrong with the Red Sox. So
they're 8 games back right now. By the way,
I mean, eight games back. If it's, late September, mid-September, that's insurmountable almost, right? But even here earlier in the year, these games count, right? We always say that, these games early in the season count. You lose the division by 1 game or get out of the wild card by 1 game. And, you kick yourself on a game that you blew back in April, so these games really count. I'm loving what the Yankees are doing. I'm loving what the Mets are doing. I think that, again, it's early, but the optimism is certainly there for both of us. I want to get to the NBA playoffs in a second, but the draft with the Jets and Giants give me hope also that maybe we'll have a really good football season as well. It's been a long time. You're just Giants, man. It seems like we're so far away from Eli and that team that they had that was so mentally tough. To get through the playoffs that year, to win in Green Bay. I remember with Coughlin, and it just seems like it's a generation ago almost, when 10 years is really not that long, but it's been some bad football that we've had year in and year out. And we finally got some players from the SEC, from the Alabamas and LSUs, and the Jets really fill some big needs, and finally seem to have some playmakers again. You've heard me complain about this a lot. Every time the Jets seem to have a playmaker, they trade them away or they cut them, or something happens contract wise. And even a playmaker on defense like a Jamal Adams and Robbie Anderson, the list just goes on. And finally, they've got some guys that will go out there, and Zach Wilson has got to prove himself already. Second year, this is going to be a big year for him. because he's got weapons, and the Giants just plugged hole after hole after hole. That offensive lineman that they got, Saquon Barkley is just like chomping at the bit. He's like, I can't believe we got this guy, So do you have a lot of hope for the upcoming football season now?
Yeah, I think especially like moving forward, like you look at the Giants, who's really that good in their division? I know the Eagles, they made the playoffs last year. Jalen Hurts can take another step forward. He's got a new weapon in AJ Brown. The Commanders are a weird team. Not even just talking about the name. I mean, Carson Wentz seems like he's an off and on type of guy. They still have a really good defensive line. The Cowboys are still the Cowboys. Like, I feel like sometimes they're really hyped up and then they never reach those expectations. But then sometimes that like no one expects anything from them, and then they start out like 12-2 or whatever. So I look at the Giants and I'm thinking, new head coach, new system, they've got a shot. The Jets too, like you look at the rest of their division, the Bills are definitely like in an elite class.
Yeah.
I'll give you them. Josh Allen has been an excellent quarterback.
Yeah.
But like the Patriots, people were laughing at the Patriots draft. Don't tell New England fans that, but no one really likes what they've done.
Yeah.
The Dolphins also, I mean, they have all the turmoil with the Brian Flores, and then there was the whole saga with Tom Brady wanting to get his way to Miami. So it just seems like really bizarre there too.
Yeah.
Like, and also a lot of people have said like the Jets might have drafted the best draft class ever, let alone this year.
It's definitely their best draft class, for sure. I can't remember a draft class that was bad. They've drafted one player like, they've drafted one player here or there, like a Wesley Walker back in the day, Toon. I mean, they've drafted some studs here and there, but in terms of the collective, especially the first four guys, is just it's unbelievable that they were able to land those.
Yeah. Well, and we say New York sports in general, like I think the Jets and Giants, if not next year, within the next couple of years, like the Jets could make the playoffs this year. There's usually one or two fourth place teams that go from fourth to the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised if it's the Jets.
Yeah.
The Giants, maybe. I'd love to see how Daniel Jones does by like October or so.
Yeah.
It's kind of a make or break year for him anyway. But also look at the NBA. I know we're not really big on the Nets, but there's optimism there. Ben Simmons, I don't know if you saw, is going to be undergoing back surgery, so hopefully he'll be ready for the season.
Yeah.
And like you have Ben Simmons facilitating, which it's still an odd fit with him, Kyrie, and KD, but we'll see how it works. And then I don't know, the Knicks might do something.
The Knicks will be good. I think the Knicks will be good again this year. I think they'll, they lost too many games that they should have won first half of the year, and they played really well that last part of the season. They'll be okay, and they'll bring in another piece or two. I'm really confident and optimistic with the Knicks. We'll jump to the NBA while we're talking, and I want to say this with Ben Simmons, because I think, and you and I never did this, we were more focused that there was something mentally, a mental health thing with Ben Simmons. And it turned out that we're probably right, because him having back surgery obviously showed that there was an injury there that looks like it happened in practice. And, I'm just hoping that people who were killing him, saying that, oh, he just didn't want to play, you just never know. I mean, there are some athletes where, the injuries might hurt them a little bit more than others, right? When you mentioned Baker Mayfield, the guy played with busted up shoulder. I don't know how many injuries he had this year, but he still played. And then there's some that, have a strain or something like that, and they can't play. You can't get into people's head. And I told a story, I think, before when he passed away, but there was a pitcher on the Astros who was really good named J.R. Richard, who they thought was kind of a malcontent, who just all of a sudden said, I can't pitch. There's something wrong with me. I can't put my finger on exactly what it is. And, it went around that he just was lazy. He didn't want to pitch. And then a few weeks later, he had a stroke, and the guy was never really the same. as a pitcher. I mean, this was a guy they weren't measuring, how fast throwing, but he was definitely throwing in the high 90s back then. He's just this excellent pitcher. He passed away recently. A lot of people felt bad. They were saying, hey, he was just lazy or whatever. The guy had something wrong. He had a blockage, obviously, where his arm was going dead, and he winds up having a stroke. So you just never know. If an athlete says that they just can't do it, we can draw all sorts of conclusions, but yeah, you just don't know. I thought we were saying the right things about Simmons, and I think a healthy Ben Simmons is really, really, really good for Brooklyn, because as long as they let him have the ball, right? Let him facilitate, let him get Kyrie to his spots, let him get Durant to his spots. He's a great defensive player. And, the free throw shooting, hopefully he'll get past that. But I think that coming back healthy, because it sounds like he'll be ready in September. I think that'll be good for the Nets. Let's quickly go through NBA playoffs. Anything surprise you in this next round? These are great matchups. Anything jump out for you? 76ers maybe being down 0-2 to Miami?
Well, I think that one of the biggest things. You want to say hi, Isaac? No? Okay. He's going back. I think one of the biggest things I mentioned it last week, there's always those big injuries that happen.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking Joel Embiid, whether you're talking Chris Middleton, whether you're talking Devin Booker. I know Devin Booker's back, but
yeah.
I think the Sixers really miss Embiid. And I think it's interesting because I've heard this, and I'm kind of debating whether this is whether it's people trying to be a little more hot take-ish, and I hate James Harden, but James Harden has kind of changed his game a lot over the last couple of years.
He absolutely has.
And I don't know if that means that he's slowing down, or he just realizes what he needs to do as a collective looks different. Because when you're playing a backseat to, say, Kevin Durant, who is who's one of the best players in the NBA, top 5 easily. You're not going to try to take away shots from him. You're going to try to get him the ball as much as you can. And I think as a result of that, also Embiid's kind of been the same way. Embiid is an MVP finalist. I hope he wins, but I don't think he will. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out. Especially if they end up getting swept, it's going to look really bad for him. It's going to look bad for Doc Rivers, which I feel kind of bad for them. But also Miami is a good team. Miami was in the NBA Finals 2 years ago.
Yeah.
As far as the other series go, the Milwaukee-Boston series is looking like it's going to be a fun one.
Oh, yeah.
Giannis is still a very good player. It's funny. I had my Celtics fans friends they're rooting hard for the Celtics. I still think the Celtics might pull it out, especially if Chris Middleton doesn't come back.
They're the Bucks miss him, no doubt. No doubt. Absolutely.
As far as the West, I mean, Phoenix is still Phoenix. I think they've weathered the storm of Devin Booker, and now they've kind of re-hit that path of we're unstoppable. I mean, Luka Doncic had an amazing game 1, and they still ended up pulling. I'm
surprised Dallas is down 0-2. I really am. It's a tribute to how good the Suns are. Because it's not this is a slouch team. I mean, I'm surprised they're down 0-2. I agree with you on the Suns.
And also another non-slouch team would be Memphis. I feel like I'll even say it myself. I feel like I kind of wrote them off. I was like, well, Golden State, championship pedigree. You have Steph Curry there, Draymond Green. Memphis plays tough. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, John Morant, he's just unbelievable. And I mean, this is his moment now, right? His coming out almost, he's just, now I think everybody is really discovering how great he is. And boy, oh boy, that team, if they get at least just one more piece, they've got some very good players, but if they get one more piece on that team, oh my gosh, they're going to be unstoppable. I hated the play of Bane when he hit. In fact, I'll just reveal one of my guys now that I had of who am I rooting for, and that's Gary Payton Jr. for a full recovery. you could just tell right away when he fell on his arm that there was something seriously wrong. And that was
Yeah.
just a horrible foul. I mean, what was he trying to do? I think he just blacked out because and I don't know him that well because just Memphis just hasn't been on as much as some of the other teams. So I don't know him that well. But by all accounts, he's not a dirty player at all. It was like such a lapse in judgment. Let the guy get the layup. It's that early in the game too, and you're trying to swat what? I mean, you want him clunking him in the head while he's up in the air like that. And Gary Payton Jr. is one of those players I really root for because it looks like he found a home with Golden State here and was just had such a big role on that team. And you just hate to see him go down like that. He struggled when he first came out of college, and he's bounced from a few teams. So you just hate to see, you hate to see that type of injury anytime, but especially here in the playoffs. And so yeah, Memphis, I tell you, they're such a dangerous team that there's some series here that are going to be interesting. I think some series here are going to be over pretty quickly. I do think that Miami will probably close that out in at least 5, especially without Embiid, and it's a shame because that would be a really really interesting series if Embiid plays or if he can play, but it doesn't seem like he will. I think the Phoenix series. I think Dallas will get back into that series when they go to Dallas here. But I do think that probably 6 games, the Suns will close that out. But this Memphis, Golden State, and Boston, Milwaukee, those I think are going to be long, grinded out type series. I really do.
Yeah.
So this is a fun time of year again. And I think we can. You had anything else on the NBA? Because we can go ahead and jump to our final who are you rooting for thing.
No, I think that's about it.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think the Philly Miami series is pretty much done. I would probably also say Suns Mavs, but who knows on that one?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the Mavs seem to turn a corner. Like I said, I'm surprised they're down 0-2, but I think they turned a corner. I think they'll get back into the series. I don't know what that looks like. Hard for me to picture them winning 2 in Dallas, but they might. But I think they'll make that a series. But Phoenix is just so good. They're back to clicking on all cylinders, and it's going to be tough for anybody to beat them in the conference as well as in the finals. I mean, obviously they're our pick to go all the way. All right, so I'll kick off who I'm rooting for. I already said Gary Payton Jr. Rooting for him for a full recovery. That was just a horrible injury. I'm rooting for the New York Rangers a little bit here because it's been a long time for hockey. They lost in 3 overtimes the other night, but they're only down, 1-0. I think they're going to give that team a really tough time, Pittsburgh, and because I like what they've done because they really rebuilt and they made the hard decision to cut their goalie, and that turned out, unfortunately, because the goalie has, some real physical ailing issues. Turned out to be the right move. I'm rooting for the Islanders, see if they, can make some noise here in the playoffs again this year and maybe get over the hump and get to the finals. But I'll tell you, the guy I'm really rooting for is one of your guys, and that would be one Aaron Judge. I'm sure you followed this kid that the guy caught the foul ball and gave it to him. And the guy who's named Derek Rodriguez after the father's 2 favorite players. And then the kid breaking down and crying, and then Aaron Judge going out of his way the following day, yesterday, to get the kid into the dugout. And I don't know if you heard what Aaron Judge said after, but he represents, I think, the good in all of us and in baseball when he said, listen, to see a kid wearing my jersey, it just, I can't believe it, because when he was a kid, he wore, other players' jerseys, and to bring this kid into the dugout, signed his that ball, and gave him his batting gloves. I mean, the kid just breaks out crying, and so to me that is baseball, right? Because it's a sport it should be a kid sport, and hopefully baseball is attracting kids again because of all the great young players that they have, and Aaron Judge is certainly one of them that seem to be very kid friendly. Tatis and Vladimir Guerrero, this next generation that has come up are just, they pay attention to the little kids at the ball game. I think we need to see more of that. So I'm rooting for Aaron Judge to have a huge year, sign a huge contract, be here in New York for a long time to come. He seems to just he seems to get it right. He's a little Derek Jeter-ish in terms of he doesn't say much. He can talk to the media and say a lot of words and really say nothing. But I think he probably takes his cue from Jeter because he acts a little bit like him. But what he did with that kid was just, I loved it. Outstanding.
Yeah. No, I really love that story. And I think it was really cool to kind of see. First of all, the Blue Jays fan, like, hey, this kid's wearing an Aaron Judge shirt, give it to him.
Yeah.
But then also being able, like, I'm thinking of like my 10-year-old self. If that was me, I would die.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah. All right. So I'll start with my non-team guy that I'm rooting for. I'm rooting for Luka Doncic. I do want him to at least win a game here. I think there are some people that kind of overrate him a little bit, but I mean, he's had an excellent series so far, and it would stink if he didn't even win a game. Like the Mavs are still like, they're still probably a piece away. Jason Kidd is a pretty decent head coach. I wouldn't say excellent, but like he's up there. Luka also, when he's healthy and he's right, he's one of the top players in baseball. Wow, top players in basketball. So I would love to see him at least win a game. A lot of times when it comes to series like this, unless you're talking the Nets getting swept, it usually stinks when you see like a team get swept, especially like a team that finally is getting over the hump. Mavs haven't won a playoff series since 2011, and then they just get like wiped in 4 games. It kind of just feels a little wrong.
That'll feel wrong. Yeah.
Um,
I got an interesting question for you before we leave, but go ahead. Who else are you rooting for?
My guy, Michael King, is my other guy.
Yeah.
So he has been absolutely excellent so far this year. I'm just going to read off his line. He's 2-0, which, I mean, he's a reliever, so that doesn't matter. But a 0.51 ERA. He's played in 8 games. He has a save. He's thrown 17 innings, 10 hits. He's only given up 1 earned run, 3 walks, and he leads the majors with relievers with 25 strikeouts.
Amazing.
He's kind of been a guy that's been like the quadruple A type of guy where he's up and down. He'll make like a spot start here and there. He's like the mop up guy, but this year he's kind of just taken it to a whole new level. Funny because like he's one of those guys you'll never think of as a Yankee, but what he credits kind of some of his new stuff this year to is Corey Kluber.
Wow.
Who threw like maybe 6 starts. One of them, of course, a no-hitter, but
yeah.
But like he says that like he went to the Kluber school of learning like how to throw a little bit better. So
yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. I didn't realize his stats were that good, but I knew he was good, man. Oh man. And I didn't realize that Corey Kluber had that type of influence on him. All right, before I let you take us home, it's a quick question, and I'm stealing this from Pardon the Interruption, and I thought that it was such a good question. This was yesterday. One player you can have. I'm going to give you 2. Pick one. Ja Morant or Luka Doncic. Who are you taking?
Oof. I think I'd take Ja Morant. Because I feel like Ja Morant actually, like, I feel like sometimes Luka gets a little out of control. He's a lot more vocal with the refs. Not as much as, say, like Julius Randle, but I would take Ja Morant. I think Ja Morant also has more upside than Luka, but yeah, that'd be my pick.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going with Morant also, but I think Morant, and it's because of the same reason that you said. I think mentally, Morant is just a lot more. Although I've seen him getting into it too, not with the refs so much, but with other players. I think he's his mentality is just a little bit more steadier. Doncic, one day I just see him just exploding on a ref. He argues every single call, and you just can't do that. The stars you see, LeBron used to pick his spots. LeBron argues a lot now, but He used to pick his spots when he would say something, but talent wise, I think they're both pretty much equal. Moran is more of a high flyer, and sometimes a high flyer can get hurt, because they're a high flyer. But I think I'm taking Moran, but you can't lose, just a hair there, but just two phenomenal young players, great representatives also of the NBA. All right, I'm putting the music on the podcast part. Kenny, take us home.
Alrighty, this is Kenny Squared End
Kenny.
with sports on the positive tip. We will see you guys next week.
Absolutely.